Morena, everyone.
Kia ora.
Morena.
We're just letting everyone in and then we'll make a start. Okay, should we make a start?
Looks good. So I'm just going to kick us off, everybody. Ko Michelle Gallagher, tōku ingoa. My name is Michelle and I'm the Program Coordinator with the Centre for Social Impact. And I'd like to welcome you all here today for this morning of our Te Puaha Talks webinar. It's a free program of workshops offered to the community sector by the Centre for Social Impact through support from Foundation North. So to date, we've presented on a wide range of topics, including grant writing, collaboration, evaluation, and wellbeing. You can access these all through the CSA website, and I'll pop a link in the chat shortly. Before we get started, I'd just like to get you to do a quick poll. Let's see if I can multitask, and I will get that up for you. Foundation North are interested in seeing how many of their grantees are accessing these webinars. So if you're happy to put your little votes through, that would be really appreciated. I can see them popping in. Thank you, everyone. I think that looks about everyone. Fabulous. All right, and so today's session is on your sphere of influence, and it's proudly part of the Auckland Climate Festival, a citywide month full of climate action in Auckland. And this year's festival theme is Nahuia Awai, which encourages you to consider how our relationship with the natural world can strengthen our climate response. I think that ties in really nicely with the session that Arohanui and Esther have planned for you today. And so now I'd like to hand over to Arohanui to open us with a karakia. Thank you.
Tēnā tātou, nau mai, haere mai, ki tēnei kaupapa hira hira, nā māua nā mātou te Waimarie e ki te noho I Waitangi a koutou I tēnei ata mō tēnei kaupapa hira hira, tēnā rā tātou mauri ora kia tātou katoa. Me timata ai tātou I te karakia. Ko te reo o nā manu tērā, ka tangi nei I te ao. Kua uru ko te rā, ki Waitangi I a ranginui I a papatuanuku, mauri ora e. Kia ora, good morning everyone. Ko Arohanui West tēnei, huri tēnei no Rotorua nui a kahumata momoe no Te Aroha whānui. And yeah, that's me. My name's Arohanui West. I'm here on behalf of Climate Action Aotearoa alongside Esther Whitehead. I come from the centre of the universe, Rotorua in the Bay of Plenty, and I whakapapa to Te Aroha whānui, Ngāti Awa, Ngāti Tūwharetua. And I'll pass you over to Esther.
Kia ora te whānau, ko Esther Whitehead, tōku ingoa. So I reside in Tahuna, Queenstown, and you can probably tell from my accent that I whakapapa back to England. So nā mai, haere mai, welcome today. This is a really interactive session, so we hope you enjoy this 45 minutes of action. So Arohanui and I work for Climate Action Aotearoa, and we actually advise on the funders' commitment for climate action to our signatories. We've carried out research earlier on this year, and that research was really kind of investigating what the opportunities are for our community trusts and signatories around climate action, what the progress has been made. For today's session, it's really about you as an individual. So much of this isn't relevant, but there's two aspects on this slide that I really just want to point towards. One is the second piece, which is educate and inform around the tika transition. So today we're talking about tika. And the goal of tika is equity. It's reo for equity and just. And the goal is to leave no one falling short while staying within our planetary boundaries. So a massive task that we're all very aware of. The second thing that I'd like to point you towards for today's session is the fifth thing on our screen here, which is exploring supporting mental health and climate action directly. So when we carried out research earlier on in the year, we did realise that there were a lack of questions on mental health. Yet this korero came through time and time again in our qualitative questions with our signatories. Following, obviously, Cyclone Gabrielle, it's really deeply affected people. And today's session is actually going to be looking at behavioural psychology to a degree. And that looks at our agency and our tino rangatiratanga, our ability to think about what we can do and what we can control. And that's really important when we have, great uncertainty in an unravelling world. Thank you.
Okay, so today we're going to take you on a little journey in 45 minutes, now 42 minutes and 3 seconds. And so we're going to start by looking at our whakapapa, and by whakapapa I mean our connection to Te Aotearoa, the living world. Then we're going to look at your tino rangatiratanga, your agency, and then we're going to throw to you, what are you going to do about it? What's your call to action? So let's start with that connection or that whakapapa that we have to Te Taiao, to the environment, to Te Aotearoa, the living world. Titiro ki muri, kōkiri ki mua, looking back to get ahead. So I really want to highlight that divine and intrinsic relationship we have with the natural world. For thousands of years we lived in sync with the taiao. We knew to grow and harvest in accordance to the seasons and the maramataka, the stars. We knew, and when I talk, I'm obviously talking about Māori because that's my personal relationship, but you can also think about that relationship that you have and that your people have with the taiao as well. So we knew when to leave our food spaces to restore and replenish, and we call that Arohanui, so we would leave that area to replenish itself. And so it's really important that we know that when we talk about mātauranga Māori or mātauranga a hapu a iwi, what we're actually talking about is a really long period of observation of the world around us. I'm talking thousands of years of observation of that world. And from that observation grew a really strong relationship. And we learned really quickly that that relationship was reciprocal. It was kind of a give and take relationship. So we knew that in order for us to be well, everything around us and our taiao had to be well as well. And I want to highlight some of our mātauranga by talking about the tui. I'm sure you're all familiar with the tui, our native bird. And the tui is kind of like a parrot, so it actually loves to mimic things. And something a lot of people don't know is that the tui likes to mimic sounds it hears the least often. So it likes to mimic really unique sounds in the ngahere. And from our long period of observation, we know that the tui mimics these unique sounds and therefore is a tohu or a sign of which birds are in really low dire numbers in the ngahere, in the forest. So 90% of the time these days, when you listen to the tangi of the tui, what you're hearing is actually the tui mimicking the tangi of the korimako. And that's really telling of the low numbers of korimako that we're seeing in our forests. And that's an example of our mātauranga Māori, our connection, and how that can't be replicated. Now we're going to talk about the big C word, colonization, and consequently the Industrial Revolution and what that did to that relationship. It severed that relationship that we had harvested for thousands of years, that understanding that we, people in the taiao, were not separated. You know, they call us tangata whenua, they don't say tangata and whenua. The Indigenous people of Aotearoa, we refer to ourselves as tangata whenua, which is symbolic of that connection. And this kind of industrial revolution, colonization, has severely impacted that connection. It sees our resources as something to plunder and profit from rather than something to protect and be connected to. That also, sorry, I just want to say, that also really impacts the way our mātauranga works, because one of our really common mātauranga is that when the pohutukawa tree flowers, So when the red of the pohutukawa shows, that's the really good time to go and get kina from our moana. And now that our weather is changing, we can't rely on that mātauranga anymore because of the changing of the weather due to climate change. And that really impacts not only our planet, but our well-being as well. So I just want to remind you all to begin this session that you are not separate from the world around you, although the world we currently live in feels very separate, feels very disconnected. You are actually te tai ao koe, ko te whenua koe. We are not separate, we are one and the same, and our well-being is interconnected too. I'd just like to highlight this first photo, this black and white photo in here, and it looks like a skeleton of a tree, of a rako. What that photo actually is the nerve cells in your brain. And so if you want to connect to te tai ao, look within, because everything in our tinana, even your lungs, they reflect the world around us, and they reflect the rako, the moon, all of the things that we see and see beauty in and see that connection in is actually in us. So to connect to te tai ao, we need to reconnect with ourselves. And I'll finish this segment with a quote. Ka tiaki koe I tō ao, ka tiaki tō ao I a koe. When you take care of your world takes care of you. So that's a brief kind of kōrero about that connection and that whakapapa that we share with our living world. Now we're going to kind of zoom in a little bit and say, well, what's my agency? What's my tino rangatiratanga? What can I control? Over to you, Esther.
Kia ora, thank you, Arohanui. So this week quote here, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And as Arohanui said, we understand the whakapapa where we've come from, and that does support our understanding of where we need to go. However, the complexity and the creeping nature of climate change actually doesn't serve us to think about it with great urgency. So those of us that may feel anxious actually have this sense of urgency, but we don't necessarily understand what we can control and what we can't. So one of the aspects that we're looking at today is this idea of we can or we can't. Is reactive thinking tends to be phased around I can't. Can you just go back to the last slide, Arohanui? And proactive thinking tends to be around I can. So really this exercise is about noticing what we can do in order to support our well-being. So moving on to the circles of influence, many of you may already have come across this tool, Covey's Circle of Influence. This really just helps us break down problems so that they're not overwhelming. So it's just a really cool visual tool to be able to really start to, I think, categorize our worries. So when we think about what is in my control, we talk about things like our behaviors, actions, and attitudes, what I can and what I can't. When we think about what is not in control, but we can actually influence, we can think about our home environment, perhaps our colleagues, perhaps our finances. And then we also think about the things that we just simply can't control, that we may have to learn to accept or let go of. So moving on to the next slide, what we've done here is just pulled these circles apart. And previously to this, this webinar coming out, we've sent through these exercises as a resource. But the best way to really do this is we've decided that it's very personal exercise, right? What I care about is very personal to you. What I can influence is very personal to you, and what I can control is. So this can actually be quite a triggering or emotional activity to do. So we're going to do this independently. So if you haven't got the printout resource, just simply draw 3 circles on your page and just label them what I care about, what I can influence, and what I can control. And we're going to take you through this. So the first circle, what I care about. So Arohanui and I will just kind of pitch in here. So it might be things like climate change. It might be things like homelessness. It could be anything that you care about. What I can influence. So this is things that you have direct ability to make some decisions around and to be able to influence. So for example, you may be able to have some influence over your finances. You may be able to have influence over the choices that you make. What I can control are things that you you actually have agency yourself to make a decision on. So the way you react to something, the way you respond to something, the behavior that you choose to display with others. So we're going to just take you through our own personal stories here, because often what we find in this exercise is that when we do this, it really prompts others to think about it. And the really important piece of this puzzle is that essentially every time we do this, we have an aha moment. And if we don't have an aha moment, you can get your money back, because we're hoping that you do. And on the outside of the circles is what I can't control. So there's a fourth part to this, which is anything that you simply have no control over at all. So Arohanui, I'll be quiet for a moment. Would you like to give us an example with your thinking while our guests populate their circles?
Sure. Yes. So as Esther said, feel free to start writing down your thoughts in these 3 circles while I talk. But I'll give you an example. So I'm from Rotorua, as I said, and so I really care about our fresh water, because we've got heaps of beautiful lakes in my district, beautiful rivers, but they're actually not in the best shape. So I really care about our fresh water and the health of our fresh water. I can influence. I do some mahi for Parakore, which some of you may have heard of. They're a waste minimisation organisation, and I can influence the kind of work that I do in that space. So I can say, hey, I'm going to do some social media posts about our fresh water and why it's really important to clean your boat before you go into our lake, or why you should get involved in planting days around the lake to increase the biodiversity. And I can control my actions. So I can control how much effort I put into that. I can control how involved I choose to be in community events to uplift the modi of our wai, of our water. And I can control that I clean my boat every time I go to the lake. But I can't control every single person who's visiting our lake cleaning their boat. I just can't control that. I can't control that no one's going to drop litter in my lake. Hear that Te Tiriti girl go. Anyway, I can't control that, but I can influence it, because I can talk to my whānau, I can advocate, and I can be involved in the community. So often when you fill out that what I can't control on the outside of your circles, it might trigger a thought of, I can't control that, but I can influence it.
Thank you, Arohanui. So it's a bit distracting with us talking, but take a bit of time to think about this really thoroughly. I'm also going to tell you my story. Again, hopefully it's not too distracting. So these circles of influence became something that was actually quite important to me, because back in 2013, I felt great anxiety around particularly plastic pollution. And I decided that I just had to do something about it. I care deeply about our waterways. I have a background in water ecology. And I wasn't currently working in anything related to it. I was actually working in the education sector. So what I decided to do was start a petition against plastic bags in supermarkets, which took off and went in the direction that you're aware of. And then I thought, okay, what else can I influence? So I set up a charity and got really heavily involved in my community, and came up with an idea called Disrupt, which was about disrupting disposables at events. And through this exercise, we managed to create massive changes at our events and reduce plastic waste. But what I wasn't thinking about whilst I was doing all of this was what I can control. And I said yes to everything. I put no boundaries in place. I gave too much energy and I burnt out. It's a familiar story. And so what's really important is that what I can control is your well-being. You do have control over it. You can control your boundaries. You can control the amount of emotion that you give to things, the amount of energy that you give to things, and the prioritization that you put towards your efforts. So hopefully those 2 stories help you to think about your own. Now, because this is a personal exercise, I don't know if anybody wanted to kind of share anything in the chat, or if that's coming through. Arohanui and I can't Can't see any chat, but if you wanted to, if you've had any kind of aha moments, then do feel free to share them in the chat. So this tool, what we're going to do with this is we're going to really get you to think, as we said, about the what I can influence. This is the important piece. Okay, this is what we carry forward into actions. So we're going to move through to start to think about what's the next stage of this. What are you actually going to do? Would you like to speak to this, Arohanui?
Yes, have you guys had enough time to populate those 3 circles? Do you need like a couple more minutes? Oh, sorry. Can't see in the chat if no one said anything.
The best way to think about this as well is that we've given you an exercise, and you can watch the recording again if you want to follow any instructions, but I would propose that maybe following the webinar you come back to this and refine it. We've got some feedback. Your shares were helpful and also affirming. We've had enough time. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. Cool. Awesome.
So we've had a look at that connection. We've had a look at our agency, our tino rangatiratanga. So now it's, what are we going to do? Let's make a plan.
Wonderful. So this exercise is really about what you can influence and what you will do now. So climate action is full of jargon. Even the word climate action has just become trite. You know, it's hard to understand what we mean by that. It does have the word action in it, which does obviously make us think that it's a doing word, it's a verb. So we are going to think about what we're going to do. So on your screen now, you have a quadrant which has a horizontal axis across, which says time waster through to impactful. We also then have a vertical axis which says easy down to hard. And in each of the 4 quadrants, we have do now, plan, not the right time, and false busyness. So we have just adapted this quadrant. Some of you will be familiar with it. It's used sometimes in project management. What we've done is we've created it around a prioritization and impact activity. So what we want to do is we want to take some of the thinking in the grey area that we had in our circle of influence, and we want to start turning that into some actions. So for example, if something is easy to do, we can just simply do it now, but what we want to establish is how impactful is it. So we would move it around based on the horizontal axis of whether it is left to right. Now on the left, the time waster does not mean that it's not important. So if we flick through to the next slide, we'll give you some examples. This is quite a hectic kind of slide, but we'll talk through it. So I'm just going to go straight to this one, carbon emissions scope 3. I understand that we've been talking at a very individual level, but we can also use this for organisations. And carbon emissions scope 3 look at a whole supply chain of carbon emissions, right? And lots of organisations are starting to look at carbon emissions. Now, I've put a question mark on this, but it's at the moment it's by time waster. Now that goes against all logical and current thinking, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that carbon emissions isn't important. What I'm suggesting is that potentially for a small organisation, it might not be the right time because we don't have the resources to be able to do it. So carbon emissions might be on the bottom right quadrant around planning and impactful. Equally, signing a pledge. I'm sure many of us have either signed individual pledges or organisations have, and signing a pledge is pretty easy, right? We just simply sign up. We've done the work of ticking the box, but actually implementing the actions of a pledge is where the mahi comes in. So that's the impact, and that's in the bottom right. Arohanui, would you like to give some examples?
Sure, and I'm going to not use any examples that are on the screen because I like to make things difficult for us all. I'm going to keep on with the water theme. So if I was to create a wānanga, because I have the agency to do that with Karakore, I could create a wānanga or a workshop about freshwater. That would be quite a lot of work. So it would be quite impactful because I could promote it and reach a lot of rohe, share it with our other Karakore partners, etc. So it would be impactful, but it would be quite hard. So I would put it down in this circle, and that means I have to plan for it. If I was to attend a planting day around our lake bed, you know, that's pretty easy. I can show up and put with my gumboots on and start planting. It's easy, but it's actually impactful. That's really important. So I can do that now. I can get involved with those. I mean, they've got planting days like every second weekend. So that's something that I would put in this slot. Is that a good enough example?
Yeah, and I'm just going to talk to false busyness. Again, you can adapt this to your needs. So false busyness was kind of my way of thinking about the story that I told earlier when I set up a charity and did all this work particularly around waste. And what I found is that there was a lot of my energy being spent on, for example, social media posts, and also the funders that were supporting us looked at measures, and one of the measures they looked at were our following on Facebook and Instagram. But I found that the energy that I gave to that versus the actual impact was not really true. And that actually, although I wasn't greenwashing during that exercise, it was a kind of false busyness. It was my energy spent that wasn't over here in the impactful section. So this really is about taking those circles and getting clarity. You know, it's about categorizing the worries, categorizing the opportunities, and categorizing the impact in particular. So it's about questioning ourselves about how are we measuring our own impact, and can we reframe it so that it serves both us better and the mahi that we're trying to achieve. So, Arohanui, did you want to add anything else before we go to
I think we should
the whiteboard?
We should do the whiteboard, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got the opportunity now. Michelle's going to share a whiteboard. We've got the opportunity for you to actually show us on the screen some of your thoughts around what came out of your circle of influence and what you can actually prioritize as an action point moving forward. So this is kind of like your kete of actions. It's your kete that you're going to take away. So on the screen, you should hopefully, and you can give us feedback in the chat if you don't mind, you should be able to see the whiteboard. And if you go over to the left-hand side, you can get a sticky note from the menu bar and you can drag it across and you can actually populate the sticky note. So hopefully this works. I can see lots of names coming up, so that's exciting. And obviously writing an essay is not going to happen right now. So it's going to be around trying to reduce your action to maybe 1 or 2 words and popping that in. Awesome. So I can see one post-it note. Yeah, I can see more. Brilliant. Okay, we've got lots happening in the impactful area, and we've got lots happening in the do now area as well. So this is exciting.
We've got things like speak to colleagues, join residents committee, prioritise exercise and time for personal well-being, I believe that says, which is so true. What else do we have? Oh, it's a bit freestyle at the moment.
Sorry, team, I can't seem to move it back. Somebody else must have control of the board there.
It's looking great.
It's gone AWOL. These are the technical difficulties. I think the post-it notes have moved off the screen, which makes it a bit tricky. Is that what everyone else is seeing? Arohanui, are you seeing it off the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a little bit of learning here for all of us.
Okay.
We can see a lot on the screen, heaps.
Yeah, is it still on the quadrant?
It's just a big board, but yeah, the quadrant's sort of moved up off the screen. Yeah.
Okay.
If you're having trouble adding a sticky note, feel free to put it in the chat instead.
Okay, so we know that the top right is the do now, easy and impactful. We know that the bottom right is plan. So these are the harder activities, things that require us to work with others. These are the marathons, not the sprints. The bottom left is not the right time. It means that that's something that we're going to put on our back burner. We're going to put on the it's the to-do list, but it's way off in the future. We're not prioritizing energy or time around it. And the top left are things that we might question ourselves around, how much energy we give to them right now, so that we don't end up just being busy for busy's sake. So reading through a few of these, they look awesome. Michelle, can you see them very well? Because it would be great to read them out, but I'm sorry, my old eyes aren't good enough to do so.
Someone has said, start suggesting ways to reframe how we work as a residents committee. What are our values? We will purchase rebooted laptops rather than new.
Brilliant.
Evaluate personal transport options to minimize carbon footprint. Plan to set up water collection system at home. Sorry, you're getting like a mega zoomed in picture of my face right now. Aren't we all so lucky? Speak to colleagues, start scoping companies' emissions. Walk to meetings rather than public transport. Oh, yeah, okay. Walk to meetings or take public transport, or rather than taking public transport.
Cool. Intergenerational conversations. Yeah, so look, that's a really great one, because korero is something that it's not necessarily easy, but it is something that we can act on straight away. And it's those courageous conversations that we need to have in our organisations and possibly in our whānau as well.
So I think we could probably stop sharing this now. What do you think, Esther?
Yeah. So this is personal to each of you. And so again, I would suggest that if, we tried to bring it together there with a bit of technical difficulty. But what's important is that this is your plan of action, essentially. So this is your opportunity to populate yours. So go back to your circles following this exercise, and then come back to the impact and prioritisation grid. And I believe that you will have at least 2 or 3 things that you can do in the do now, short term, and the next 6 to 12 months. Also, what it will allow you to do is really set boundaries around, I guess, your own behaviours. And so look back to Covey's circles of influence if you would like to revisit that as a way to reframe it personally for you. And what you can also do is kind of make a mental map of this on a one-pager, and it's very helpful to people to be able to have that as something that they can just refer to, that kind of brings them back to that that sense of, you know, tino rangatiratanga, so that they can kind of map it as a visual.
I think this is really important because we can do these things for our personal impact and prioritization, but also in our mahi as well, because climate action is really overwhelming, like especially these days. There's so many things that you can think of, and it can be debilitating because you don't know where to start. So it's really important to kind of have that zoom out moment and the aspirational thinking and everything, but also to zoom in and say, what can I realistically do now?
That's right. So our call to action is really around, don't let your knowledge about yourself remain passive. Use this tool to let it come from your mind, through your heart, and into your hands. So really it's an opportunity for you to refine this. And what we're asking for you to think about is reframing it so that you are not a product of your circumstance, but a product of your decisions, which is a really different way of thinking about it. You're a product of your decisions because your decisions offer you control, and they stem from your values. So let that sink in. It's what we know, but let it drive your behavior. Thank you. Over to you, Arohanui.
Sorry. So I just wanted to round off our session this afternoon by highlighting why. I know that water is actually, or why is the theme of the Climate Festival this month. So that's really exciting. And I just wanted to point out that Te Reo Māori is really healing for our environment and people, because Te Reo Māori is actually, so many of our kupu, or the words we use, are derived from the world around us, from the taiao. And one example I'll give you is ko waikwe. That's what we say when we're asking, who are you? Ko waikwe. But what we're literally saying when we translate that is, what water do you come from? So that kind of reinforces that connection that we know that you have, that when we see you representing your waters, your mountain, your people. So we say ko waikwe, what water do you come from? And this picture here is talking about mokopuna. When a puna is a body of water, so again, we're on that water theme. And when one of our tupuna looked into this body of water and saw his face, or his moko reflected in that puna, he kind of realized or saw the future generations, but also saw the people that came before him. So it's a reminder that we're the blueprint of the generation to come, but we're also a reflection of the people who paved the path before us. So it's a reminder to have those brave conversations, to make mokopuna decisions. So to think, what do I want to leave for my mokopuna, your mokopuna? What do I want the world to look like in 30 years, and 60 years, and 100 years? And how will the decisions I make today impact that? And I know we talked about this, and I just want to touch on it one more time, is having conversations, and having uncomfortable conversations is really important as well. You know, we can't just be all lovely and bubbly all the time. I think we have to dive deep into the issues such as colonization and all these things that have impacted our relationship in order to find resolutions. And I want to mihi to Mike Smith, who's an amazing activist, and at a philanthropic funding conference, I remember he said, if we want to talk about climate action and climate change, we actually can't have that conversation unless we talk about land back and the returning of stolen Māori land to Māori. And I think that made a lot of people uncomfortable, but it was such an important conversation to have. And, you know, it reminds me, if we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got. So yeah, be brave and have those uncomfortable conversations. And remember, as I said in the earlier kōrero, that you are the reflection of the world around you. You are not separate from the taiao. You are the taiao. You are, you are connected with everything that you see around you. So hoke ki tō maunga, kia pūrea ai koe I ngā hau o Tāwhiri-Mātia. Return to your mountain to be cleansed by the winds of Tāwhiri-Mātia. Remember to take care of yourself, your well-being, and to connect to te taiao, connect with yourself. Tēnā koutou. It's been lovely to have this kōrero with you today. I will pass you over to Michelle now, unless Esther has anything to say. I know Michelle wants to.
Kia ora. Thank you, Arohanui. Just thank you all for coming today, and I really hope that you find that useful. As we said earlier, we work for Climate Action of Aotearoa, and Michelle is sharing that resource with you on the chat, but you can also find that on the resources as well. So please come to us if you would like us to possibly do a session with your workplace. We're available for that. And we hope that you found this tool useful. It's really about, you know, your time and your place right now and what you can do. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I think every time I do those exercises, I find something new that I can put into action. So hopefully you'll come back to them and think about what you can do in your lives and in your workplaces. So we really wanted to make sure that we can continue to meet the needs of the sector with these Te Puaha sessions. So I popped into the chat a quick survey link. It's just 4 questions there. If you're happy to do that for us and share what resonated and what more we could offer in the future. After today's session, we'll also share out the recording and those resources as well, and they'll be available on the CSI website. So yeah, thank you both, everybody, and Arohanui and Esther, for your great kōrero. Arohanui, back to you for karakia.
Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou. Just want to reiterate what's been said. It's been really enjoyable to kōrero with you all this morning, and to challenge or to put a wero out there to you all. Tēnā rā koutou, mauri ora kia koutou, ki o koutou mana, aira. We'll finish with a karakia. Me noi tātou, kia tau tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki ai hukaraiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmene. Mauri ora, ka kite.
Ka kite, kia ora, thank you.